the case of Debbie Lynn Randall. Debbie Lynn Randall was born on August 21, 1962, in Marietta, Georgia, to a loving family with 2 older brothers. Her parents divorced when she was young. Her mother later married a man named Roy, who became Debbie's stepfather. The family lived in a small apartment building. Debbie was a cheerful and sociable child. On the evening of January 13, 1972, after dinner with her family, Debbie went to the laundromat to supervise the laundry. Debbie's home was just a short distance from the laundromat, so her mother wasn't overly concerned about her safety when she was sent to do the laundry. The original plan was for Debbie to go with her brother, but he was feeling unwell, so Debbie's mother sent her husband to pick up the laundry. Debbie went with her stepfather, holding a box of laundry detergent. At the laundromat, Roy put the clothes in 2 washing machines and left, leaving Debbie waiting for the cycle to finish. After the wash, Debbie had to walk home and ask someone to pick up her clean clothes because she couldn't carry them herself. However, when the laundry should have been finished and Debbie still hadn't returned, her mother began to feel uneasy. It was getting dark outside, so she and her husband decided to walk to the laundromat to look for Debbie, but she was nowhere to be found. The employee informed them that Debbie had left the laundromat some time ago and had not returned. The news worried her mother, who began searching the surrounding streets with Roy. As they walked, they discovered a suspicious scene. A short distance from the laundromat, in the parking lot next to a car, there was a spilled detergent. Since Debbie had brought a box of detergent with her, her mother suspected that it might be hers. Despite expanding their search to the entire parking lot and the surrounding area, they found no other sign of Debbie. Neighbors who knew the family joined in the search. Debbie's mother decided to call the police for help. The police investigated the parking lot and discovered their first clue: spilled laundry detergent just inches from a parked car and on the car door. They found several clear fingerprints. The police found fresh fingerprints on the car that were located lower than the handle, which seemed unusual. They suspected that an unknown person might have grabbed the girl while touching the car at this spot. The officers collected the fingerprints and sent them to forensic experts for analysis. They also started searching for the car's owner to confirm whether the fingerprints belonged to them. With no other leads, the police began a thorough search of the area, looking for new clues or witnesses. The laundry worker reported that she did not see anything suspicious. Debbie had waited for the laundry to finish, then left the building with the detergent box. It is possible that she went home to ask someone to pick up her clothes. Police discovered the first key witness, 12-year-old Sandra, who said that as she and her friend walked to a laundromat to drop off dirty clothes, they saw a man grab a girl on the street, drag her to his car parked near the laundromat, and drive away quickly while she screamed for help. Sandra and her friend were lucky to avoid the man's car. Debbie screamed in a car, but he did not slow down. At the time, Sandra did not consider what she saw to be a kidnapping. She assumed the man was a family member who had come to pick Debbie up, possibly against her will. So Sandra did not report the incident to the authorities or tell any adults about it. After learning about Debbie's disappearance, Sandra provided essential details to investigators. She described the abductor's vehicle as a dark-colored, likely 1957 model pickup truck. She also described the man as young, white, with thick dark hair, wearing a white t-shirt, jeans, and black work boots. Another key witness, a girl who lived in the same building as Debbie, shared her observations. She saw a dark-colored pickup truck drive past the apartment building on the evening in question. The girl initially thought the driver of the car was her uncle, but when he stopped in front of her and looked at her, she realized it was someone else. She described the driver as a white man with medium-length dark hair and provided additional details about his appearance. She also reported that he parked his car near their building, next to the same car where a detergent spill would later be discovered. Another witness, a man who lived near the girl's home, reported that a dark-colored pickup truck, possibly a Dodge, almost hit him while he was driving to visit his wife in the hospital. The driver appeared to be in his 30s with dark hair, and the witness saw a girl in the car trying to escape while the driver held her with one arm. Based on these accounts, the police believed Debbie had been kidnapped. They circulated the suspect's vehicle to all patrol units and created a composite sketch of the driver based on descriptions from witnesses. Some officers searched for similar vehicles and checked their owners, while others conducted a wide-ranging search for the girl. As the days passed, more volunteers and police from surrounding towns joined the search. Police questioned Debbie's family, and after investigation, they were all cleared as potential suspects. Debbie's biological father, who lived in the same city, was notified of her disappearance at work and immediately joined the search effort. Police also ran background checks on convicted criminals who lived near Debbie's home, but none of them appeared to be viable suspects. The search for Debbie continued for over 2 weeks without any significant leads. It wasn't until January 29th when a group of students joined the search teams that a breakthrough occurred. The students were sent to search a wooded area several miles from Debbie's house. After nearly 5 hours of searching, one of the students noticed a set of tracks on the ground that led from the trail into the forest, suggesting that something had been dragged into the woods. As they followed the trail about 150 feet into the woods, they discovered a human body and immediately contacted the police. Upon further inspection, they quickly identified the body as Debbie Randall. She was wearing the same outfit her mother had described on the day she went missing. However, her shoes were missing. The medical examination of the Debbie's body revealed that she had been strangled to death and had also been sexually assaulted. A single dark hair was found on her body, which was likely to belong to the killer. Although DNA analysis was not available at the time, experts were able to examine the hair under a microscope and estimate that it came from a man between the ages of 18 and 30. The investigation then focused on the victim's clothing, which was covered in soil. Police enlisted the help of a geologist to analyze the soil, along with a forensic team. They discovered that some of the soil contained a type of soil mined less than 10 miles from their town called North Georgia clay. However, other stains on the clothing were found to be from a different type of clay, mined by a company just 2 miles from where the body was found. Police theorized that the perpetrator did not kill Debbie immediately, but rather drove her to remote areas, sexually assaulting her in one location and killing her in another, before finally dumping her body in the woods. Police believe the killer may have been hired by one of the nearby mining companies. After contacting these companies, the police searched the employees of both companies but did not find the suspect or the vehicle described by the victims. Furthermore, they found fingerprints near the abduction site. But unfortunately, when these fingerprints were compared to the suspects, there was no match. Debbie's death sent shockwaves through the city, with thousands attending her funeral. Police repeatedly ran into roadblocks in their search for clues. Police officer Morris Nix investigated many suspects and eventually narrowed the list down to 4 people. For Morris Nix, Debbie's murder remained a top priority throughout his career. The case took a breakthrough with the creation of the FBI's DNA database. Experts successfully extracted a genetic profile from hair found on Debbie's body, which was then entered into the database. However, no matches were found. In 2015, 43 years after the murder, police reopened the case and decided to re-examine the victim's clothing using modern technology. The clothing had been stored in an evidence vault since the crime. When re-examined, some of the evidence had degraded over time, resulting in only a partial DNA profile. In 2018, Debbie's mother gave an interview expressing her hope that her daughter's killer would be found. After the tragedy, she found it unbearable to stay in their apartment, so she moved to another city. Her only wish was for the case to be solved before she died. Sadly, she died of cancer at the age of 78 just weeks after the interview and was buried next to Debbie. In 2019, the local police department received additional funding, which allowed them to conduct a more thorough analysis of Debbie's clothing. This time, experts successfully extracted a full DNA sample, but unfortunately, the perpetrator's DNA was still not found in the FBI database. Debbie's father was interviewed and shared that he thought about his daughter every day for decades. Sadly, he passed away in 2022, shortly after the interview. Police turned their attention to the first piece of evidence they had, DNA. They partnered with a Florida company that specializes in an advanced DNA analysis technique called genomics. Police provided the company with all the biological samples they had collected over the years and waited for the results. Experts created a DNA profile of the suspect and began searching for his relatives in public genetic databases. After analyzing thousands of potential relatives of the killer, investigators narrowed their search to a family in Marietta. In 2023, police asked the family to provide a DNA sample, which they agreed to. Analysis showed that the killer was indeed a close relative of the family. Experts re-examined the family tree and quickly identified a man named William Rose. However, William Rose committed suicide in 1974, just 2 years after Debbie's murder. Police obtained a warrant to exhume William Rose's remains and took a sample of William Rose's DNA for analysis. 51 years after Debbie's murder, police finally identified William Rose as the killer. At the time of the murder, William Rose, 24, lived in the same building as Debbie's family, and he visited them frequently. The case has finally been solved. Debbie's brother, Melvin, is the only living relative. Melvin attended a press conference and expressed gratitude to everyone involved in solving the case that lasted more than 50 years. In the last days of 1973, Deborah Kerb was a 17-year-old student at Fresno High School. Her friends and teachers described her as a cheerful and outstanding student. On December 31, 1973, Deborah hosted a small get-together inside her family's residence located on the 4000 block of College Avenue in Fresno, California, while her parents were away in Pismo. To welcome the new year, Deborah Kerb and her friends, which included her boyfriend and another couple, engaged in puzzle solving while listening to music. When the clock struck midnight, signaling the start of the year 1974, the small party ended and the young host bid her friends farewell. Tragically, Deborah would only have a little glimpse of a potentially fruitful year. On January 1, 1974, in the late afternoon, Deborah's parents came back home to find her lying dead with her own leotard wrapped around. Tragedy was reported to the police. An investigation into the case was launched, and detectives started looking into persons who had last seen Deborah alive, specifically those who had attended her party hours earlier. A young man named James Arthur Blaylock, who was 17 years old at the time, was quickly suspected by authorities. James was one of the party attendants and had come along with his girlfriend to the gathering. He was said to have driven the others home when they left Deborah's residence. Authorities believed that James Blaylock might have committed the murder. They were of the opinion that he had gone back to the Kerb family home, using a spare key he had known the location of to get inside and rape and kill Deborah. Unfortunately, though, that was only a theory. There was no concrete proof to convict James for the crime. In 1974, due to a lack of supporting forensic equipment, detectives were unable to prove what they so firmly felt to be true: the fact that 17-year-old James Blaylock was a deadly killer. The Deborah Kerb's case, however, slowly became cold. Many years later, in 2006, the Fresno County Sheriff's Office reopened the investigation and attempted to run some of the biological evidence collected from the crime scene through recently developed DNA technology. This time, there was a success. James Blaylock's DNA matched the sexual assault kit. To further confirm this, Deborah Kerb's body was also exhumed in 2006 so that a DNA sample from her could be obtained. The samples were then submitted to the Serological Research Institute, a non-profit forensic lab in California that soon confirmed James Blaylock as the culprit investigators have been looking for all these years. James Blaylock, who was incarcerated at the time, was subsequently interviewed by Fresno County Sheriff's detectives Marty Rivera and Jeff Kurtzen. He denied killing Deborah and having sex with her. Blaylock soon changed his account after the detectives confronted him with a DNA match of his semen. He claimed he and Deborah had consensual sex but never killed her. The case was brought by the district attorney's office, but it had to be dropped for lack of supporting evidence. The case went cold again for another 15 years. In December 2021, Sergio Toscano, a current cold case detective and former Fresno County Sheriff's officer, revisited the Deborah Kerb's case and asked for a repeat DNA test on the leotard used to strangle Deborah. James Blaylock's DNA results were obtained again. His DNA was confirmed on the sexual assault kit and also appeared on the leotard. After this discovery, in 2023, detectives tried to get in touch with James Blaylock, but they soon learned that he had died in the hospital in 2022. He was 66 years old at the time. Blaylock had a significant criminal history over the course of his lifetime, which included violent crimes and becoming a registered sex offender. In June 1980, Holly Campellia, a native of New Jersey, vanished following a period of poor mental health. Holly had been battling with mental issues since high school, but she became increasingly erratic when she got to college. One fateful day on her way to a counseling appointment, she jumped out of her mother's car and was never seen again. All her family knew at the time was that she hitchhiked to Sacramento. After sending her family one letter, Holly stopped contacting them. Immediately after her disappearance, her parents, Augustine and Sally Campellia, reported her missing. But unknowingly to them, her name was accidentally removed from the National Missing Persons Database. Meanwhile, in August 1980, the body of a 21-year-old woman was discovered in a cornfield off Seavers Road in Dixon, not far from the location of the current Pedrick Produce Market. She was dressed in a green wool sweater despite the summer heat and had been shot in the head numerous times. Detectives at the time had no idea that the woman's name had unintentionally been erased from the National Missing People database just 2 weeks prior. The victim and her murderer could not be identified, and so she was dubbed Dixon Jane Doe for 12 years. In 1992, when Augustine and Sally Campellia got to know that their daughter Holly Campellia had accidentally dropped from the missing persons database used by law enforcement, they contacted the officials to re-add her name into the database. 5 weeks later, the Campellias were informed by Solano County detectives that they had a match. Holly Ann was their Dixon Jane Doe. This was heartbreaking news for Holly's family. In an interview, her mother, Sally, sadly said, "I just kept hoping she would show up one day with grandchildren. But with each year, I'd lose a little hope." Even though Holly Ann could now be laid to rest properly, neither her family nor the police knew what had happened to her. The investigation was abandoned until 2021, when Holly Ann's relatives contacted the police to inquire about the possibility of using modern forensic methods to identify Holly Ann's killer. Investigators got to work, and a male's DNA was found after evidence samples of the crime scene were sent for testing. In 2023, investigators from the Solano County Sheriff's Office declared that they think the DNA belongs to Herman Lee Hobbs, who is currently 76 years old and serving a sentence at a prison in Chowchilla. According to research, Herman Lee Hobbs had been a violent criminal throughout his adult life. In 1969, when he was 22 years old, he was accused of carrying out more than a dozen armed robberies across the Sacramento region. Hobbs admitted to being the serial robber and consented to plead guilty after leading police on a wild car chase. However, when it was time for his sentence, the 6'5" mechanic attempted to flee the courthouse and had to be tackled and subdued by a CHP officer. Herman Lee Hobbs' time behind bars for armed robbery was brief. He was back on the streets by 1975. He relocated to Rio Linda, a street away from Terry Pata, a 13-year-old junior high school student. One day in January 1975, Terry Pata was sent home from school early due to her having nausea and a headache. She, however, never made it home. 9 days later, her body was discovered nearby, placed inside a drain pipe. She had been raped and fatally stabbed. At the time, no suspect was ever found. Years of sexual assault by Herman Lee Hobbs weren't made public until 2000. He was convicted of raping a 15-year-old girl in Yuba County that year. When Hobbs was taken into prison, his niece and daughter came forward to express concerns that he might be responsible for the deaths of numerous children. This tip led investigators to Terry Pata's long-suppressed murder. When DNA from Terry Pata's crime scene was examined, it matched Hobbs. Hobbs, who was already serving a lengthy jail sentence for rape, pled not guilty to Terry Pata's murder and was given a further 25 years to life sentence. This was just the start. That same year, some loggers discovered a woman's skull in the Yuba County foothills. Through DNA testing, the remains were identified as 29-year-old Brenda and Tucker, who vanished from her house in the area of Oroville in 1994. Hobbs was known to Brenda Tucker's loved ones. In the 1990s, he had occasionally even stayed at their home. Hobbs was accused of killing Tucker, but a court eventually dropped the charges in 2002 owing to a lack of proof. In 2023, After his DNA was a match to the DNA at Holly and Campellia's crime scene, Solano County investigators had Hobbs moved to the Justice Center Detention Facility in Fairfield. He is being charged with first-degree murder. According to the Solano County Sheriff's Office, investigators are collaborating with other organizations in Northern California to find any additional potential victims of Herman Lee Hobbs. The case of Cody Johnson. At the age of 23, Cody was looking for a long-term partner. He confided in his friends about his desire to marry a woman who shared his values, specifically someone from a religious background. On Halloween 2011, he met Jordan, who would eventually become a pivotal figure in his life. Born in August 1991, Jordan grew up in Kalispell, in a deeply religious family. She attended the Faith Baptist Church, where she worked with children and families, and her ultimate goal was to become a stay-at-home mother. When Cody and Jordan first met on Halloween, they quickly formed a connection. Although initially shy, Jordan opened up to Cody about her dreams of starting a family and her love for nature. Cody was smitten, but Jordan, who was only 20 at the time, was not ready for a serious relationship. They went on a few casual dates but maintained a platonic relationship. However, Cody's feelings for Jordan only intensified, and he made a concerted effort to win her over. He joined her church, First Baptist, and began to socialize with her friends and community. Before long, their friendship blossomed into something more. Cody and Jordan officially started dating in November 2011, and Cody became completely enamored with her, wanting to spend all his time with her. Cody was convinced he wanted to marry Jordan just weeks into their relationship, despite her desire to remain chaste until marriage. Those close to them noticed Jordan didn't seem as invested in Cody as he was in her. While some attributed this to her shy nature, others were concerned about the imbalance in their relationship. They rarely showed affection in public, didn't hold hands, and didn't flirt. So, when Cody proposed in December 2012, many of Jordan's friends were surprised she accepted. They thought she wasn't ready for marriage after just a year of dating, but they were happy for her. Jordan eagerly shared her engagement ring on Instagram, captioning the post, "Best early Christmas present ever." The wedding was set for June 29, 2013, and planning began immediately. Cody was heavily involved, along with Jordan's best friend and matron of honor, Kimberly Martinez. However, it was Jordan who seemed most enthusiastic about the wedding planning, even going so far as to perform a song with custom-written lyrics by Elizabeth Shee, which would later seem eerily prophetic. When someone, including Kimberly, brought up the idea of actually being married to Cody, Jordan's mood would quickly deteriorate. She repeatedly questioned Kimberly, her matron of honor, about whether she was making the right decision. On her wedding day, Jordan's true feelings about the marriage were evident. She was anxious and avoided eye contact with Cody, frequently looking down. Despite regaining her composure for the wedding photos and first dance, Jordan's unease persisted. The morning after the wedding, Jordan confided in a friend via text from their honeymoon hotel room. She revealed that she had not consummated the marriage and had rejected Cody's advances, not only on their wedding night, but for the next 6 nights as well. Jordan was anxious about Cody's expectations and didn't want to be intimate. She planned to use the excuse that her period had started, hoping it would work, as she feared being forced into something would cause her to panic. Jordan had an intense fear of sex due to her faith and reservations about Cody, causing her to feel anxious about intimacy with him. This anxiety reached a boiling point on July 7th, 8 days after their wedding, when Cody canceled his golfing trip with friends at the last minute, because Jordan had planned a surprise for him. After attending church and spending some time alone on the lake, they had dinner with friends at Dairy Queen. Cody then went home with Jordan, and this was the last time anyone saw him. When Cody failed to show up for work, his coworker Cameron Fredrickson became concerned. As a reliable and punctual employee, Cody's absence was unusual. Cameron decided to visit Cody's new house, which he had purchased with Jordan before their wedding. After knocking with no response, Cameron let himself in and searched the house for any clues about their disappearance. However, he found nothing. Cameron's concern turned to fear when he discovered Cody's phone in the garage. It was unusual for Cody to be without his phone, and this sparked grave concerns. After making several calls, Cameron learned that no one had seen Cody since dinner at Dairy Queen at 8:30. He immediately went to the police station to file a missing persons report, and the authorities took the case seriously from the start. Officer Chaz Zimmerman, one of the first to question Cameron, was struck by his distress. Zimmerman found it odd that Cameron's boss, not his wife Kimberly, reported him missing. Later that day, Kimberly finally reached Jordan, who claimed that Cameron had left with friends in a black car with Washington plates. According to Jordan, Cameron had received a disturbing phone call at the restaurant, so she gave him space. However, that night, Kimberly retrieved her phone charger from their car and discovered a text from Cody. The message stated that Cameron had planned to go for a ride with out-of-town friends who were visiting. Cody was unclear about the friends' identities, but Cameron always took his visiting friends to Glacier Park. Jordan told the police that she didn't recognize the men who were involved in Cody's disappearance, and that they hadn't fought that night. She suggested that Cody might have gone joyriding with his friends from out of town as a possible reason for his disappearance. When questioned about why she didn't report Cody missing, Jordan explained that she didn't want to upset him by filing a report if he was planning to return within a few hours. However, as the hours turned into days, Cody's friends and family gathered at the family home, expressing confusion over his sudden disappearance. It didn't seem like something Cody would do, leaving his wife without a word. Jordan maintained her story until Kimberly confronted her about it. As the conversation continued, Jordan became increasingly uncomfortable. Eventually, she became so agitated that she threw her wedding ring across the room. While some thought this was just her unusual way of coping with the situation, Kimberly was convinced that Jordan was hiding something. The next day, she returned home and called her friend. Meanwhile, Jordan was summoned to the police station, where she was confronted by officers about the inconsistencies in her story. One of the officers said, "Jordan, I've gathered information that contradicts what you're telling me. I've spoken to several people, and it's crucial that I know you're being honest." Jordan responded, "I understand, and I think there's more to the story." Around the same time, Sher Johnson met with the police, armed with Cody's phone records from the day he vanished. She was worried about her son, and hoped that the mysterious man Cody had called could provide some clues about his disappearance. However, it turned out that the mysterious caller was simply a friend returning a tool to Cody. The police quickly ruled him out as a suspect because he had a solid alibi. His wife was in labor at the time of Cody's disappearance. With all other leads exhausted, the police refocused their attention on Jordan. It was clear that she was hiding something, but her story didn't quite add up. On July 10th, a crucial breakthrough emerged in the case. An unexpected email arrived from Carmen Tony 607, claiming that Cody was dead and there was no need to continue searching. The message read, Jordan showed the email to Hannah, remaining expressionless as he relayed the news. According to the email, Cody had supposedly died after falling off a cliff in Glacier National Park while with unknown companions. Hannah was devastated upon reading the message and urged Jordan to report it to the police immediately. Hannah recalled her reaction. Jordan didn't show any emotion, didn't even cry. She just handed me the email and I started shaking. I told her to go to the police, and she did, but I was rushing her, saying, "Go, move, what are you doing?" Detective Corey Clark was frustrated that the investigation was ongoing, and an anonymous email hadn't provided the closure they needed. In fact, the email seemed suspiciously convenient at providing the exact information they'd been searching for and advising them to call off the search. What bothered Clark more than the email's content was Jordan's reaction, or lack thereof. She seemed completely unfazed by the news, which implied her husband's death. Jordan's behavior became even more peculiar when she organized a trip to Glacier National Park with her friends and family to search for Cody. According to Hannah, Jordan was, despite finding nothing on the first day, they resumed their search on the second day, and it was then that Jordan suddenly claimed to have found Cody's body. Her announcement was met with skepticism. It's baffling that someone would do such a thing. This wall serves a purpose, after all. The autopsy revealed that the victim's head and arms suffered the most damage from the fall. Cody's loved ones were heartbroken over his death, but Jordan felt a sense of relief, according to Hannah. Now that a body had been found, the authorities would finally close the case. However, there was still a major issue. The police had no idea who man Tony 607 was. When Jordan was first questioned about the mysterious message, she directed the police to Tony Stalkup, a fellow car enthusiast and acquaintance of Cody's. Although Tony hadn't seen Cody in several months, he was so worried about him that he gave the police full access to his accounts. The police were unable to find the email address they were looking for, and Jordan and Cody's phone records did not provide much information. As a result, they had to contact Google to obtain the IP address associated with Carmen Tony 607. While waiting for this information, the police re-interviewed Cody's family and friends. During these interviews, Kimberly finally shared with the police Jordan's fragile mental state leading up to her marriage to Cody. She had expressed doubts and fears about marrying him, asking Kimberly multiple times if she should go through with the wedding. Jordan confided in Kimberly about her horror and fear of having sex with Cody, even regretting that Ed had married him and wishing she could undo everything. When Kimberly advised Jordan to be honest with Cody about her feelings, Jordan responded, "I should be happy, but I'm not. If I tell him, it's going to break his heart." 2 days before Cody's disappearance, Jordan typed a disturbing message. "He held me down the other night, and he was in my face." On July 7th, the police discovered another revealing exchange in which Jordan intended to talk to Cody, but was terrified of his reaction. Jordan went to her friend Kim's house later that day and recounted her conversation with Cody, which didn't go well. Cody became enraged, and she left to give him space, eventually spending the night at her step-parents' house. When the police learned about this, they became more suspicious of Jordan. Around the same time, they received information from Google that linked the email address Carmen Tony 67 to her stepfather's computer. Although a brief interview with each member of the Graham family suggested Jordan was behind the email, it wasn't conclusive evidence. However, cell phone records and security cameras painted a clearer picture. The records showed that Cody and Jordan's phones were in the vicinity of Glacier National Park on the night of Cody's disappearance. Security cameras even captured them entering the park at 9:17 p.m. Despite Jordan's initial denial of being with Cody that night, the evidence suggested otherwise. On July 18, 2013, the police brought Jordan in for questioning and presented her with the evidence. She broke down in tears and finally revealed her version of events from July 8th. According to Jordan, she confessed her marital doubts to Cody, leading to a massive argument. Jordan and her friend decided to take a trip to Glacier National Park and went to the Loop Trail. Jordan explained what happened next in her own words. If her friend hadn't intervened, Cody would have fallen face first down the hill. The detectives asked her, why did she turn around and push him? Jordan believed it was because her emotions were overwhelming at the time. She felt immense pressure, anger, and every other emotion all at once. The detectives were interested in her comment about a blindfold, as they suspected a connection to a stray scarf found near the crime scene. However, Jordan didn't provide any further information, and it was eventually proven to be unrelated. Jordan claimed that Cody's death was an accident, and that she didn't plan the assault in any way. Jordan explained that she hadn't planned to kill her husband, Cody. The situation escalated, and in the heat of the moment, she pushed him off the bridge. When asked about the incident, Jordan admitted that Cody had turned his back to her, facing the cliff, and she pushed him with both hands. She also confessed to creating a fake identity, Carmen Tony, and sending messages from her stepfather's house. Despite her confession, the police didn't charge Jordan that day, and she walked out of the station a free woman. However, they later arrested her at Cody's funeral on July 22nd, after she was seen texting on her phone, displaying a lack of respect that eroded any remaining sympathy for her. Rumors circulated that Jordan had killed Cody to escape their marriage, without the embarrassment of divorce. Her behavior at the funeral, including texting, seemed to confirm these suspicions, implying that she was more concerned about herself than mourning Cody's death. Jordan's motives were called into question, as people wondered if she ever truly loved Cody. She was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, and making false statements. After reviewing the evidence, the jury added premeditated first-degree murder to the list of charges. Her trial began on December 9, 2013. From the start, the prosecution aggressively challenged Jordan's story, raising doubts and inconsistencies. They questioned why she lied to Cody's friends and family and whether she was truly remorseful or innocent. The prosecution's questioning was relentless, and Jordan's situation looked increasingly dire. The testimonies from Cody's loved ones further damaged Jordan's case, portraying her as a heartless wife who murdered her husband to avoid intimacy. Her defense team attempted to argue self-defense, but it seemed unlikely to succeed. Faced with the possibility of a worse outcome, Jordan opted for a plea deal, accepting a 30-year prison sentence without parole in exchange for the prosecution dropping the first-degree murder charge. Before Jordan was sentenced, she tried to withdraw her guilty plea when she learned the prosecution intended to pursue a charge of premeditated first-degree murder, which carried a maximum 50-year sentence. The decision was up to District Judge Donald Malloy, who had to decide whether to accept her original plea or start a new trial. On December 13, 2013, Judge Malloy sentenced Jordan Lynn Graham to 30 years and 5 months in prison. Despite Jordan's attempt to reverse her plea, her case was not reopened or re-examined. The federal prosecution aimed to set a precedent with her case, sending a message that anyone who commits murder under federal jurisdiction will face swift and severe punishment. As a result, Jordan will not be released from prison until she is over 52 years old. In early hours of January 3, 1991, when the Seaside police arrived at Sabato Park, they discovered the body of Vicky Johnson, a 34-year-old mother of 3 lying on the sand on the playground. The police couldn't believe the sight before them. Vicky had suffered a very horrible death right in the park. She had been strangled and suffocated. Her upper torso, which held part of her clothing, was set on fire, and she had a significant amount of sand lodged down her throat, as if her head had been held in the sand. Vicky also had bite marks from the attacker all over her body, and her clothes were torn. Her murder was so brutal that it left the community of Seaside in shock for many years. Due to the crack epidemic and the high crime rate at the time, Seaside was known as a violent community. That reputation was only strengthened by Vicky Johnson's brutal murder. Her case remained cold for almost 4 decades after investigators exhausted all possible leads. In 2021, Vicky's case was reopened by the Monterey County District Attorney's Office when the Cold Case Task Force was launched. After providing additional evidence to the California Department of Justice for DNA testing, investigators were able to identify a suspect in connection with the murder after 2 years of thorough testing. Thanks to the DNA sample taken from Vicky's fingernails, authorities were able to identify her killer as Frank Louis McClure after entering the DNA into Cody's. Apparently, McClure left significant DNA underneath Vicky's fingernails while she struggled and fought vigorously for her life. Frank Louis McClure, who had lived all his life in Seaside, had a long list of crimes in his history book. His criminal history dates back to 1990 and includes assault, causing serious bodily harm, and resisting law enforcement. McClure broke the terms of his probation in 1994 by engaging in domestic violence and an assault with a deadly weapon. He received a 4-year prison term afterwards. From 1991 to 2011, Frank Louis McClure committed numerous crimes involving domestic violence and assault. He received little time in prison and was, however, never charged for murder. It is unknown whether McClure and Vicky were romantically involved. The motive of her murder is still unknown and probably will remain a mystery since Frank Louis McClure died at the age of 77 in 2021 in his Seaside home. Regardless, Vicky Johnson's family is grateful that the murder has been solved. On September 28, 1979, 3 visitors who were out day tripping in Sugar Pine Point State Park called a local news reporter to report finding a body at a picnic area on Lake Tahoe's western coast in California. When the cops showed up, they discovered a terrifying situation. There laid a woman who had been battered and strangled to death. A lost shoe and numerous indications of prior battles suggested the woman had been pursued across the campground before her assailant caught up with her. Detectives assumed that she was most likely a solo traveler because there was no indication of her car or of any other possessions that would have served as identification. Despite the collection of forensic evidence, including a sexual assault kit from the crime scene, the case gradually became cold since neither the murder victim nor her possible killer could be identified. The young woman was reluctantly buried by the authorities in a simple grave with the sign unidentified female. Many years later, in 2015, the El Dorado County Cold Case Homicide Unit made the decision to re-examine the long-dead Jane Doe and provided local Jewish newspapers with images of a particular religious jewelry she had been wearing when she was discovered. This appeared to have been a great move because the daughter of the victim reached out to the police after she recognized the jewelry. A DNA test was conducted and the victim was identified as Patricia Carneahan through a DNA match to her now 61-years-old daughter. Patricia Carneahan was 35 years old when she vanished while traveling throughout California in a red Volkswagen minibus in September 1979. Earlier that month, she had let her family know she was returning home. But after a month of not returning, Patricia's family in Virginia had reported her missing. Even though her Volkswagen was later found abandoned at a car dealership in Venice, California at the time, there were still no leads as to Patricia Carneahan's whereabouts. After her identity has been verified, authorities returned Patricia Carneahan's body to her family for a proper burial. Investigators were now left with catching Patricia's killer. After investigators tested the DNA on a discarded beer bottle that was discovered near where Patricia Carneahan was found, it matched the male DNA found on her body during autopsy. The 3 men who reported finding a body in 1979 were then tested for a DNA match, but they were immediately excluded as their DNA didn't match the one at the crime scene. Investigators uploaded the DNA profile of the suspect into Cody's, but there was no match at the time. In 2022, in order to deal with the state's backlog of testing rape kits, the Washington State Attorney General's office launched the Sexual Assault Kit Initiative Project. Since 1981, the Spokane Police Department has maintained over 1,500 untested kits on hand, some of which were used in a rape investigation involving a man named Harold Carpenter. 1994. A homeless Spokane lady alleged that Harold Carpenter had physically and sexually abused her in April 1994. At the time, Carpenter was arrested and placed into the Spokane County Jail on a charge of second-degree rape. The case was, however, suspended after it was determined to be unprovable, and no official charges were ever filed. The rape kit was nevertheless saved as evidence. After the rape victim's kit was turned in for DNA testing in August 2022, a forensic scientist with the Washington State Patrol Crime Lab notified Spokane Police Department detectives in early February 2023 that the DNA from the 1994 rape kit is connected not only to the DNA in Cody's, but also to the 1979 murder of Patricia Carneahan in El Dorado County, which was a cold case at the time. Based on this evidence, in 2023, investigators from El Dorado County arrived in Spokane to help the Spokane Police Department arrest Harold Carpenter. After his arrest, investigators soon learned that Carpenter had been involved in a handful of misdemeanors over the years, ranging from burglary, sexual assaults, disturbing the peace, possession of drugs, reckless driving, driving under the influence, among many others. However, he was never suspected of killing Patricia Carneahan. He either got away with his crimes or served a minimum time behind bars. Carpenter made his first court appearance in Spokane in March 2023. He remains jailed in lieu of $1 million bail. Kelly Clayton had everything going for her. First of all, she was quite smart and bright since high school. She was a role model for other students, active in school, excelled in tests, and passed exams just as well. At the same time, outwardly, she never looked like a girl who spent days and nights sitting over textbooks, cramming lessons, and writing out something from additional literature. No, on the contrary, her looks were considered model-like, and if her grades had left much to be desired, she could have built a modeling career. She could have, but she didn't. After high school, she went to Teacher Training University to become a chemistry teacher, the insane pride of her parents, but only for the first few years of university. It is not known what turning point happened to her then, but one day, Kelly took her documents from the institution and, calling her parents, said that she no longer wanted to study, that she was too young to spend the rest of her life checking notebooks and raising ungrateful children. If she wants to, she will definitely return to her educational endeavors. In the meantime, she wants to travel and live life to her heart's content. Not the best idea, according to her parents, who were so upset that they didn't communicate with their daughter for 6 months. But perhaps if it wasn't for this desperate act, Kelly would never have met Tom Clayton. They met at a party of mutual friends, and the young man really liked the girl. Firstly, he, from the first minutes of acquaintance, began to court Kelly and show signs of attention, and secondly, Tom had a beautiful appearance and athletic physique, and all because the guy was a hockey star. For 4 consecutive seasons, he played for the semi-professional team Jackals, and in it, he was considered a strong man, a player who was able to break the opponent's ribs only if he did not approach the gate. But only a sports career, and especially built on strength and aggression, will someday fail, and Tom had to put the stick in the far corner and enjoy hockey only from the stands or from the couch, watching his favorite team on the TV screen. The couple had to move on with their lives, and first they returned to New York, where they got married, then moved to North Carolina, and then moved to the tiny town of Cato, numbering only a few thousand people. There, Tom franchised a company to rebuild houses after fires or disasters, and worked in a related profession for a friend's company. As for Kelly, after dropping out of university, she worked as a waitress, only changing places, and now she had 2 children. However, Tom was earning well enough, and Kelly could quit her job at any time and take care of her beautiful daughters. But she still believed that extra money would never be superfluous. Besides, she could use it to buy toys for her children and spoil them in every possible way. On September 28, 2015, Tom, as usual, went to play poker with his friends the Millers. He never took his wife to such events. Playing for money implied certain skills and experience in the game. Besides, someone had to stay at home with the children, and a family trip would have turned such gatherings into a noisy buffoonery and would not have brought any pleasure from gambling. That evening, Tom was not lucky in the game, but he did not get up from the table, but on the contrary tried to win back and offered anyone who wanted to stay to play until morning, but no one supported him and he went home. At home, however, a terrible picture opened before him. His beloved wife was lying in her own pool of blood, badly beaten and, at first glance, was not breathing. Tom panicked and ran through the rooms looking for his children and, luckily, they were fine but very frightened. He grabbed his daughters and headed to his neighbor Derek's house, trying to make sure the children didn't see their mother's mutilated body, and already from the neighbor's house, he dialed the police number. The officer who arrived on the scene found Tom sitting on his knees in front of his wife's body, trying to give her artificial respiration. Only the EMTs were able to pull the man away, who voiced the terrible and unpleasant information. Kelly had been dead for a long time, and neither they nor he could do anything to help her. All 2 floors of the house were drenched in blood. A major mess was in the bedroom. Apparently, there had been a struggle between Kelly and the perpetrator who had committed his atrocity, despite the fact that there were children in the house at the time. Kelly was pushed down the stairs, evidenced by the knocked-down banister, and beaten on the head with a blunt object until they were sure she was dead. There were no hints of knife or gunshot wounds. The policeman who filmed the crime scene noted to himself that Tom was shocked by what had happened and seemed lost in space. He walked from one corner of the room to another, entered the room for a split second, and immediately left it. And he could not tell the policeman where the children's room was, or where the emergency exit from the house was. But when asked where Tom himself was at the time of the murder, he answered calmly that he had been at a friend's house all evening, where they were playing poker. Then the policeman, who did not get any clear information from Tom, went to the neighbors to ask some questions of the children. Tom's eldest daughter, Charlie, referred to the perpetrator as a robber. According to the words of the eldest daughter, she and her sister were almost asleep, but they heard their mother start screaming loudly from the next room, "Charlie, run, run away from here," and then the whole place shook like an earthquake. The girls, after listening to their mother, cautiously went out of their room, but saw the criminal leaning over their mother and beating her with what appeared to them to be a hammer. The girls ran back into the nursery, closed the door with a small nightstand, and hid under the bed. It was a good thing the criminal wasn't looking for them, because that nightstand, as the policeman pointed out, was so small that it would hardly have apprehended a burglar. Say, what did this burglar look like? Well, he was a big one, like a bear. That big? Wow. What was he wearing? Blue jeans and a black shirt. He was also wearing a mask, like the one Daddy wears when he goes hunting with Mr. Bourne to shoot ducks. So your daddy has a mask like that too? Will you show me? I'd have to ask him where it is. I don't know. What else did you notice when you saw the robber? He had eyes like Dad's, and I don't remember anything else. I saw him literally just a little bit got scared, and we quickly ran back inside. Police officers checking the house were unable to confirm the girl's account that the perpetrator was a burglar. There were no signs of forced entry at either the front or back door, although on the other hand, the gate to the garage was open, and the perpetrator could have entered the house through the garage. Another thing that the police noted is that nothing was stolen from the house. Jewelry was left untouched lying in a jewelry box, and the safe where Tom kept the cash was not even touched. The doors of the cabinets in the house were also all closed. Usually, burglars check every little cabinet, every shelf, but here the whole mess was the aftermath of a fight. Experienced officers, it would seem, understood everything at once. Tom pretends to be a heartbroken husband, and it was he who killed his beloved wife and the mother of his children in order to further receive insurance payments. If Kelly's life was insured and husbands' murderers developing a crime plan always insure the life of their wives, then in case of her death, he could get up to $1 million. All that's needed is to gather evidence and the case will be solved. Especially since even her own daughter said that the mask on the robber was like her father's and eyes like her father. However, the police did not find the hunting mask in the house. After finding out where Tom had spent his time that night, the police questioned the other poker players. Is Tom the killer? Do you really suspect him? Wondered one of his friends. That poor guy had his wife murdered for crying out loud. And instead of looking for the bastard, you want to pin everything on him? How could you think of such a thing? No, Tom certainly couldn't have done it. I've known him a long time, replied another less emotional friend. He worked 2 jobs around the clock because he loved both Kelly and his kids. There's just no way that could happen. Plus, he was with us all night. We played poker, and even when everyone was tired, he kept insisting on continuing to play. Tom really was suspicious that evening, said his acquaintance Laura. During a break in the game, he took me into the next room and asked me to give him my phone to call his wife. He supposedly forgot his phone in the car and didn't want to go get it. I was first surprised that the car was 10 meters away from the house, go to it and get the phone, but still gave him a call. He stepped back to make the call outside. I didn't hear who or what he was talking to, but when I decided to check the outgoing calls, there were no numbers in the call history. So he just deleted the call. Wouldn't you agree that's odd? I told my husband about it, and he was as surprised as I was. My husband was sitting at the playing table next to Tom and noticed that Tom was not watching the process of dealing cards or watching the people around him, which is very important in poker, but was sitting with his head bowed over the surface of the table where the cards were hiding the screen of his phone. He had his phone on him. Why had he tricked me then? Where was he calling? Who couldn't he call from his phone? After Laura's testimony, the police once again questioned Charlie, Tom's daughter, and the girl repeated what she had told the policeman the first time. The robber looked a lot like her father. The next testimony was given by the niece of the murdered already after Tom was behind bars. I didn't tell Aunt Kelly. I just didn't want to upset her. She was very fond of Tom. She literally loved him. And besides, she has 2 children by him. They are my sisters. Who needs my truth? Tom was not the man he appeared to be at first glance. Yes, he occasionally spoiled my aunt with attention and flowers. He could easily babysit, which other fathers rarely do. But that was all at home. And at work, he was a completely different person. Kelly decided to help me one day and arranged for Tom to take me to work for him. She was too young to be on her own. So she understood me as well as anyone and wanted the best for me. I worked for Tom all last summer doing correspondence registration and document management. I didn't know him well before that, so at first we had a strictly working relationship. Then he got drunk somewhere and came to the office in that state. There was no one there but me and him, and for some reason, he started to tell me that his family was fictitious. He loves his daughters very much, but he doesn't care about his wife, and he hasn't had any feelings for her for a long time. He's even had a few affairs on the side during their marriage and even considered leaving Aunt Kelly. But he didn't simply because he was afraid that a divorce might leave him without a house and without money. Looking ahead, it is important to note that some of the interviewed female participants of that evening's poker game confirmed the words of Kelly's niece, that Tom was not such a faithful husband and had a sexual relationship with two women who were also playing poker that night. In addition to the information about Tom's promiscuous life, Kelly's 16-year-old niece also told about another employee of Tom's firm, Michael Beard. Michael was doing repair work on houses after the fire, and he was doing a good job. But there was one moment in those houses where Bird worked, constantly missing things. And if the first few times Tom did not believe his customers, referring to the fact that during the fire, the owners could lose something. Then when the accusations of theft began to be repeated for the third and fourth time, there was no doubt. Michael Bird not only restores the floor and walls, but also steals. Plus, in addition to stealing, there were complaints that Michael was allowing himself to come to work drunk. I was in the office when Michael's stealing came to light. Tom could yell at his employee and kick him out on the street. He was upset with his subordinate's behavior like that. He kept asking him, "How could you? Or haven't you thought about your family? Where are you going to work now?" After the incident, Tom fired Bird, but still called companies he knew and offered them to hire his former employee. Tom recommended Michael, and when all his options were exhausted, Tom took Bird in to help with the household, cutting the grass, watering the plants, doing minor repairs around the house. The detective called Michael Beard in for questioning. He said he only stole because he and his family needed the money. Tom was very good to me, defended me to the end. But I know it was my own fault. He has a very good wife. She fed me when I worked for them, even though she really shouldn't have. She also gave my children clothes that her daughters had grown out of. I am very grateful for all they have done for me. I feel so bad for Kelly. When I heard about her death, I couldn't believe my ears. I felt so bad. I even went to church and prayed for her to go to the best of all worlds. The police did not find anything strange in Michael's story and let him go. But the interrogation of his wife, Mrs. Bird, made the police doubt his words. According to his wife Holly, Tom offered Michael some work, which he did not say. And for this work, he promised to pay him $10,000. Now, that was interesting. Michael was called back to the station and had a lie detector hooked up to him. All questions were failed. Bird was lying and therefore failed the test. Realizing he couldn't get away with it, he began to testify. Indeed, Tom promised Bird $10,000 if Michael, on the day when Tom will play poker, sneak into his house, kill his wife, and set a fire in his house. The plan was to strangle Kelly and then make it look like she just burned to death in an accidental fire. Plus, the family home was insured for a very large sum of money. As the police checked, it was true. Kelly's home and life were insured at the highest rate. 2 cans of gasoline were waiting for Michael in the garage through which the house was to be entered. Everything was fine here. Bird entered the house when everyone was already asleep. He quietly began to climb the stairs and reach the bedroom where Kelly was supposed to be sleeping. But the young woman was either awake or awakened by the sound of the open door. And when she saw a strange man in the doorway, she began to scream in fright. Michael was just as frightened and pounced on Kelly, trying to close his huge hands around her neck. But it wasn't that easy. Kelly began to fight back. "I had no idea that a seemingly fragile Kelly had so much strength in her," says Michael. A heck of a fight ensued, which spilled over from the second-floor bedroom to the first-floor kitchen. Michael, because of the shock and panic, could not concentrate on the fight, but only waved his arms in all directions or just grabbed Kelly's clothes while Kelly, defending her life, aimed very accurately at Michael's face. And if the police had come to Bird earlier, they would have seen the marks from the beatings on him. But everything turned out as it did. After a long struggle, Michael hit Kelly's head against the wall with all his might. She fell and for a while couldn't find the strength to get up. Michael took out a hammer and began hitting the young woman's head with it until she stopped showing signs of life. Michael, maddened by what had happened, just ran out of the house, even forgetting that Tom asked him not only to kill Kelly, but also to set the house on fire to cover up the crime. Michael had an accomplice, Mark Blanford, who in fact served only as a driver. The day before it happened, I got a call from Michael. I had worked with him on a construction site for a long time, and I had stayed with him for a couple weeks last year, so I knew him well. I knew Michael was into petty theft, so when he called me and asked me to drive while he broke into someone's house, I wasn't surprised. I wanted to turn him down, but he offered me $500. I thought long and hard at first, but he talked me into it. He said he just wanted to rob a businessman and he needed help to get out of there before the cops got there. He said he'd help with the car. I gave in to his entreaties, but on the condition that I park somewhere far away from the house, he agreed. That evening, I waited for him in that car in a dark alley, and he came back quickly enough, breathing heavily and telling me to move as fast as possible. He didn't have any bag or sack on him, which didn't look much like a robbery. I didn't ask him any questions along the way, simply because I didn't want to know anything. I just wanted my $500, which, by the way, I didn't end up getting. On the way out, he asked me to stop at a bridge over a creek a couple blocks south of here. I stopped there. He hastily stripped off his outer garments and threw them off the bridge. If you need to be shown the place, I'll show you. Indeed, police officers who arrived on the scene at Mark's behest found parts of Michael's outer clothing near the creek, as well as the hammer used to kill Kelly. Michael, already in custody on suspicion of first-degree murder, began to change his testimony. According to him, he was indeed hired by Tom, indeed for $10,000, but only to commit arson at the house and nothing more. There was no question of murder. When he went into the house, however, Kelly was already dead. And who killed her? The detective asked. I think it was Tom. He offered me money for murder and arson from the beginning, but I refused the first offer. I'm not willing to kill a man for any money. He said I had nothing to fear, but he never could talk me into it. You may not believe me, but I almost lost my mind when I saw Kelly's body. I knew right then and there that he was setting me up, so I ran out of the house. He's the killer, Michael insisted. Michael spent a very long time assuring the police of his innocence, and all because he did not know that Mark had shown the place where Bird had thrown out his things, and that his clothes, as well as the murder weapon, had already been submitted for examination. And the experts found both on his clothes and on the hammer the blood of Kelly Clayton. And that was the most direct proof that it was him who killed Kelly, not someone else. In turn, Tom also did not admit that it was he who ordered the massacre of his wife from a former problem employee of his company. According to him, Michael knew that he had money, knew that he was not poor, and because Bird lost his job, as well as because of resentment associated with the dismissal, he decided to rob his house, but Kelly was at home that night, for which he paid with his life. It might have been difficult to prove Tom's guilt and his conspiracy with Michael if Laura, the woman who had been playing poker that night, had not told the police that Tom had called from her cell phone. The detective requested a transcript of her calls and expectations were confirmed. Then, on the night of September 28th of 29, Tom Clayton called Michael Bird. Michael was the first to go to trial. He continued to insist that he had been hired to set fire to the house in order to collect the insurance payout. He didn't kill Kelly, and as for the blood on his clothes, it was just because he was touching a dead and mutilated body, that's why he got dirty. He'd thrown his stuff away so no one would think he'd been at Clayton's house that night. His speech sounded convincing. The jury had been deliberating for 7 hours. In the end, they concluded that Michael Bird was guilty on all counts. He was facing life in prison. As for Tom, his lawyers were able to obtain records of conversations and correspondence between him and Michael, and none of the conversations clearly discussed their devious plan. The prosecution's requests for billing transcripts of his movements yielded no concrete results either. All the evidence was circumstantial. If it weren't for one nuance, the car in which Mark had given Michael a ride was registered to Tom's company, and Tom, coming to the office on his personal Toyota, left it in the parking lot, where for some reason moved to the company pickup truck, which later drove to Michael's house and left there, and took back the day after the tragedy. That is, in fact, he gave Michael the car on which he and Mark went to the crime. It was this fact that was testified to at the trial by the jury. The trial lasted 6 days, and the jury concluded that Tom had hired Michael to commit this horrible crime after all. Michael, in turn, filed an appeal. In his defense, He used the words of little Charlie, who said that the eyes in the slit of the mask belonged to her father. However, the court rejected the appeal because the description of the clothes matched the one found under the bridge. As a result, Tom Clayton and Michael Beard received life sentences. As for Mark, he was charged with manslaughter, for which he received 4 years in prison. Tom and Kelly's children were given custody to Kelly's sister Kim. After some time, Charlie has moved on from the tragedy. She occasionally remembers her mom, but absolutely won't talk about her father, who she will never see again. On July 17, 1968, 13-year-old Jackie Hart from Bergen County, New Jersey was walking home after band practice at her school. Practice finished at 9 p.m. At midnight, she still wasn't home yet and her mother called the police. The next morning, her body was found in a wooded sliver along Gothell Creek. She was punched in the face and strangled with her flag sling. 9 months later, on April 8th of 1969, 18-year-old Irene Blasig's body was found in the Saddle River, also in Bergen County. She too was strangled. On July 14th, 1969, Denise Velasca, 15 years old, left her home to meet a friend. She never made it to her friend and her body was found outside the Saddlebrook Cemetery. Denise was also strangled. This now meant that there were 3 cases of young girls being strangled in Bergen County within 12 months. A man by the name of Richard Cottingham was sentenced to life in prison when he was convicted of taking the lives of 9 people. While in prison, he claimed that he ended the lives of more than 100 women. 3 of those women were Jackie, Irene, and Denise. Police decided to follow up on the lead and came to the conclusion that he was telling the truth. If he was telling the truth about these 3 cases, it makes me wonder if he'll ever come forward about others as well. Cottingham is currently serving more than 200 years. He has been in custody since July. 6-year-old Ricky Neve lived in Peterborough, England. On the morning of November 28, 1994, he left his home to go to school around 9 a.m. His mother still recalls he did not say goodbye to her that day and simply walked out the front door. Ricky never came home that day. The next day, his body was found in the woods nearby. It was clear he had been strangled. His school uniform was thrown in a bin. Rumors soon started to spread about how badly Ricky's mother Ruth Neve had been treating her son. She was tried for the crime in 1996, but she was cleared. She was, however, jailed for 7 years after pleading guilty to child neglect. Ruth was eventually released from prison in 2000 and started to endlessly campaign for the case to be reopened, and in June of 2015, that was exactly what happened. On February 17th of 2020, a 38-year-old man was charged in connection to the case. His name is James Watson. James was only 13 when Ricky's life was taken. Ricky's mother said she felt overwhelmed and numb. It hasn't sunk in yet. I am overwhelmed and in truth totally numb. This has always been about getting justice for my son Ricky. I'd like to thank Paul Fullwood and his team for their work and effort in getting us to this moment. The news has not sunk in yet. The courtesy and care shown to me by Mr. Fullwood and his colleagues has exceeded, by far, the expectations I had. Today's news is welcome, but it is only part of a much longer journey that still has some way to run. It would be inappropriate to comment further, but what I am looking forward to is a good night's sleep that has been lacking over many years. Camper Chair Assistant Chief Constable Paul Fullwood, who led the high-profile investigation, said, "The cold case review of who took Ricky's life was undertaken by the Bedfordshire, Cambridgeshire, and Herefordshire Major Crime Unit in 2014. We began reinvestigating the case in 2015 and following extensive investigative work, we have now been authorized by the Crown Prosecution Service to charge James Watson. During the trial in 2022, we learned that James Watson's DNA matched DNA found on Ricky's clothing. The jury reached a guilty verdict in April 2022. We don't know why Watson did what he did." When Ronald Vinci, a millionaire, first encountered Catherine Pileggi, a flight attendant, he felt an immediate sense of love. Little did he know their chance meeting in the skies would ultimately shape their future. Born on August 16, 1940, in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, Ronald Vinci displayed an entrepreneurial spirit from an early age. In his 20s, he started his first business venture by renting a space on the Pacific Coast in San Diego to sell Honda motorcycles. Over time, his small shop grew into one of California's largest Honda dealerships. Ron's success didn't stop there. He opened several more car dealerships, steadily increasing his earnings. Those who worked for Vinci often described him as resolute and strong-willed, as well as a demanding employer. Ronald Vinci's personal life included a previous marriage to together. They had a son named Kerry. However, their marriage ended in divorce after several years. Following his divorce, Ron indulged in a lavish lifestyle and spent his wealth on extravagant toys. He developed a passion for collecting airplanes and helicopters, even acquiring a large hangar to house his collection. Ronald resided in a spacious house located in Rancho Santa Fe, California. He went to great lengths to obtain permission from the county commission to construct a helicopter pad on his property, despite objections from neighbors. This allowed him to commute conveniently by helicopter directly from home. Additionally, helicopter pads were installed on the roofs of his car dealerships to further facilitate aerial transportation. In 1990, the paths of 50-year-old Ronald Vinci and 34-year-old Catherine Pileggi crossed unexpectedly in the skies. Catherine was working as a flight attendant when they first met. Catherine Pileggi hailed from a close-knit family and grew up in rural Georgia. During her youth, she participated in beauty pageants and won hearts with her charm and grace. With charisma and a radiant smile, her beauty and pleasant demeanor attracted many admirers and suitors. After finishing her education, Catherine spent several years working as a lab technician in a veterans hospital. However, her aspirations were beyond this job, and she always yearned for more in life. In 1980, Catherine made a significant career change by leaving the hospital and joining Delta Airlines as a flight attendant. At that time, her annual income was $20,000. She enjoyed her new job, tending to passengers' needs and serving meals. Catherine even had some practical knowledge like using coffee grounds to eliminate unpleasant odors, a handy tip for dealing with spills on airplane seats. In 1990, a decade after starting her flight attendant career, Catherine had a fateful encounter on a flight. She met Ronald Vinci, a millionaire, who was immediately drawn to her charming and ever-smiling personality. Despite the significant 14-year age gap between them, the two began a romantic relationship. Catherine then left her career as a flight attendant and moved into Ronald's luxurious home in California. They shared a passion for travel, often visiting Aspen, Colorado, a favorite getaway spot for them. Their relationship spanned 10 years, during which Ronald never proposed to Catherine. Eventually, they chose to part ways. Seeking a fresh start and new companionship, Catherine relocated to Florida in April 2001, at the age of 45. She began a relationship with 63-year-old Dilio Carano, an insurance agent who was financially well off. The couple met through mutual friends. Catherine confided in Dilio about her previous relationship with Ronald Vinci, describing it as tumultuous and unhappy. She revealed that during the decade-long relationship with Ronald, she endured insults from him and had to deal with his heavy drinking and public discussions of his affairs with other women, all while hoping for a marriage proposal that never came from Ronald Vinci. On the contrary, wasted no time and swiftly proposed to Catherine. The couple tied the knot in May 2001, just a month after they first met. Catherine seemed very happy with the marriage. After their wedding, they began living together in Miami Beach, Florida. Dilio described Catherine's early demeanor in their shared life as resembling that of a domestic cat, gentle, calm, and quiet, with minimal eating habits. Furthermore, Catherine had a profound fear of water. She couldn't bathe in the ocean or river without experiencing intense anxiety upon entering the water. A few months into their marriage, Dilio began to notice a significant change in his wife's behavior. She increasingly requested money from him, demanding funds for clothes and gifts, while comparing him to her friends' more generous husbands. Dilio estimated that Catherine was withdrawing approximately $55,000 monthly from him. She used educational expenses as an excuse, but failed to provide receipts or evidence of such expenditures. After several months of enduring this financial strain, Dilio decided he had rushed into the marriage and wanted a divorce. Given their lack of children or shared property, the separation was relatively straightforward. Court documents revealed that Dilio Carano had a net worth of $4.5 million, whereas Catherine had only $8,000 in her accounts. As Catherine prepared to move out of Dilio's house, she expressed sadness and despair, lamenting, in 2005, Ronald Vinci, a millionaire, made a significant life change by relocating to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Convinced by friends that Florida offered favorable climate conditions and low taxes. At this point, Ron had already sold his car dealerships and accumulated substantial wealth. In Fort Lauderdale, he acquired a luxurious apartment on the 4th floor, enjoying his new residence's comforts. In the same year, Ronald rekindled his relationship with Catherine Pileggi. Catherine, the flight attendant Ron had previously dated, moved into his apartment, rekindling their relationship. Interestingly, Catherine's ex-husband, Dilio Carano, also lived in the same building, but was situated 30 floors below them. Dilio couldn't comprehend why Catherine chose to reconnect with the millionaire she once described as a monster. As their relationship progressed, Catherine became increasingly fixated on marrying Ron. Both Ronald and Catherine were no longer working and led a leisurely lifestyle. Their differences became more evident over time. Ronald was overweight and enjoyed indulging in rich foods. In contrast, Catherine maintained a weight of only 42 kilograms by eating sparingly. Ronald loved lively parties, while Catherine preferred staying home absorbed in crime stories. She rarely wore dresses, opting for shorts and sneakers instead. The couple often traveled together, crossing the sea by boat and visiting Caribbean islands by air. Despite her fear of the ocean, detailed in her diary entries, Ron incessantly encouraged her to conquer her phobia. Even though Ronald possessed considerable wealth, he had a penchant for frequenting budget-friendly bars along the Fort Lauderdale waterfront with friends. There, he would order 1 tacos and strong drinks. He might have been the life of these gatherings, flirting with women, but he often humorously remarked that his appeal to men had long vanished. Their home frequently hosted gatherings where Ronald indulged in alcohol and grew more outspoken. Occasionally, he publicly insulted Catherine in front of their friends, implying she owed everything to him. At these events, Catherine usually played a passive role, quietly catering to Ronald's intoxicated demands, serving drinks and snacks and attending to his friends' needs. This dynamic painted a clearer picture of their contrasting personalities and relationship intricacies. Ron's extroverted indulgence versus Catherine's introverted submissiveness. For 5 years, this pattern persisted. However, the millionaire remained hesitant to propose marriage to Catherine. By 2010, Ronald began confiding in friends about his desire to end the e-killing and seek a younger companion. In early 2011, Ronald Vinci found himself hospitalized due to severe intestinal issues. These issues were most likely stemming from years of alcohol abuse. The doctors attributed his illness to alcohol consumption, but Vinci noted a recent shift in the taste of his food. A friend jokingly suggested that maybe Catherine had tried to poison him. Ronald dismissed this jest without much thought. In reality, Ronald had neglected his health. His excessive alcohol intake and the habit of consuming numerous pills for relaxation and better sleep were taking a toll on his well-being. In June 2011, Ronald Vinci made a significant purchase, acquiring a new waterfront home in Fort Lauderdale valued at $3 million. Conveniently located just steps away from where his yacht was docked, the property promised comfort. At the age of 70, Ronald looked forward to spending the rest of his life in this residence. He eagerly anticipated visits from his only son, Carrie, and his grandson. Carrie's occupation as a waiter was a subject of jest for Ronald, who humorously claimed that Carrie was eagerly anticipating his father's passing. On the afternoon of June 28, 2011, the gardener of Ronald Vinci made a distressing call to 911, reporting an incident involving his employer. When the police arrived at the scene, they discovered the lifeless body of the millionaire in a guest bedroom. Shockingly, his body had been meticulously wrapped in plastic bags, tightly taped, and placed inside a sleeping bag along with soiled sheets. And on top of it all was a substance resembling wet dirt, later identified as coffee grounds. Further examination revealed a slashed mattress beneath the blanket on the bed. The gardener informed the police that according to Catherine Pileggi, Ronald had fallen down the stairs, suffered a head injury, and subsequently passed away. The officers had deep suspicions that Ronald Vinci's death was not accidental. During police interrogation, the gardener provided a chilling account of the events leading up to the discovery of Vinci's lifeless body. According to his testimony, Catherine Pileggi had called him late at night, urgently requesting his presence at Vinci's residence. Upon his arrival in the morning, he was confronted with the sight of the millionaire's body wrapped tightly in a sleeping bag in one of the guest bedrooms. Catherine, distressed and tearful, implored the gardener to assist her in burying Ron. She revealed that Vinci had expressed a lifelong wish to be laid to rest in the ocean after his demise. To carry out this plan, she had purchased a blue container intended to hold Vinci's body, with the intention of taking it out to sea using the millionaire's yacht. By the time the gardener alerted authorities, Catherine had already brought this container home and placed it in the garage. Upon conducting a thorough examination, the medical examiner made gruesome findings. Ronald Vinci, aged 70, had sustained 9 stab wounds to his chest and neck. He bore marks consistent with hammer blows on his head and had ultimately met his demise from a gunshot wound to the head. On June 27th evening, Ronald Vinci's friends visited his house. Catherine prepared the meal and Ron provided drinks during their gathering. During dinner, Ron mentioned that his passport and one of his pistols were missing. He also complained that the food tasted unusually bitter. Unexpectedly, Ron, who was known for staying up late, said he wasn't feeling well and went to bed as early as 7:30 p.m., an unusual time for him. His friends eventually found this early bedtime odd and left his house afterward. Catherine Pileggi, aged 54, was brought in for questioning a few hours later, where she provided a detailed confession. She recounted events around 1 a.m., shedding light on what transpired that fateful night. On June 28th, a drunk Ronald Vinci woke up and began verbally insulting Catherine. The situation escalated as he chased her down the stairs, stumbled and fell, hitting his head severely. Catherine claimed she helped him up and guided him to a guest bedroom on the first floor. Afterward, she cleaned the bloodstains on the stairs. A few hours later, she entered the guest bedroom to check on Ron, finding him asleep with a loaded gun on the nightstand. Fearing that Vinci intended to kill her, Catherine acted out of fear and desperation. She grabbed the gun and fatally shot him in the head. During interrogation, Catherine admitted she was very scared and angrier than she had ever been before, feeling like her soul had left her body. After the shooting, she inflicted numerous additional wounds on Ron, using a knife and a hammer. Catherine then wrapped his body in a bag and attempted to conceal the evidence by calling the gardener when she realized she couldn't dispose of the body alone. Surveillance camera photos showed Catherine purchasing a large blue container at a hardware store after the murder. This container was intended to be used for disposing of Ronald's body in the ocean. Authorities discovered a gun matching the one used to shoot Ronald in Catherine's car with her fingerprints on it. Her Bentley also contained incriminating items such as a knife, cut-up pieces of a mattress, clothing, and rubber gloves, all stained with Ronald's blood. Consequently, Catherine faced a charge of first-degree murder and was subsequently arrested and detained. Further investigations revealed that just a month before the murder in May, Catherine had been involved in a legal dispute, wherein her sister accused her of borrowing money but refusing to repay it. Catherine defended herself by claiming that the money was a gift and therefore refused to return it to her sister. On May 17th, the court ruled in favor of Catherine in this dispute. Ronald's neighbors reported hearing screams from Vinci's house on the night of the crime. Additionally, a witness spotted a white car with a large trailer near Vinci's home early in the morning. This car belonged to the gardener. Ronald Vinci's friends disclosed that he had been contemplating ending his relationship with Catherine for quite some time. The couple had not been intimate for several months and even slept in separate rooms within their large house. Just a few weeks before the tragedy, attempted to give Catherine $1 million through one of his workers, requesting her to leave his house permanently. Prosecutors believed that Catherine's primary motive was the fear of losing her wealthy partner. However, Catherine's defense argued that she had been a victim of severe abuse during her relationship with Ronald and acted in self-defense. Questions arose regarding why she did not immediately contact the police, why she did not tell the truth right away, and why she endured the alleged abuse for years without leaving him. Some of Catherine's relatives defended her in court, and a court psychiatrist identified some signs of domestic violence. Nonetheless, none of Ronald's close associates could confirm witnessing any mistreatment in their relationship. They described Catherine as calm and noted that she never complained about her life. During the court proceedings, Catherine made a startling accusation against Ronald Vinci, claiming he was responsible for the sudden death of her younger sister Angela 3 years prior. In December 2009, Catherine, Ronald, and Angela had embarked on a Caribbean cruise together. Angela had been struggling with substance abuse issues and consumed excessive alcohol during a party on the cruise, leading to severe illness and intense convulsions. In an effort to help her sister, Catherine performed artificial respiration. Tragically, Angela's heart stopped beating, resulting in her death. It later emerged that Ronald had provided Angela with some pills on the evening of the cruise, presumably to help her relax. Catherine firmly believed these pills were a contributing factor in her younger sister's death. In 2014, a jury found Catherine Pagel guilty of the murder of Ronald Vinci. Consequently, she was sentenced to 25 years in prison. She is currently serving her sentence at the LEL Correctional Institution in Marin County, Florida. Her potential release date is set for January 2034, when she will be 77 years old. The story of successful and wealthy Ronald Vinci took a tragic turn due to his ill-fated relationship with quiet and unassuming flight attendant, Catherine Pagel. Despite his many wise decisions in life, this particular relationship ultimately proved to be a fatal error for the millionaire. Renee Pagel was a 41-year-old mother of 3 in 2006 and lived in Kent County, Michigan. She was a health and nursing instructor at the Kent Intermediate School District's Career Technical Center. She was busy recovering at her home. A few days earlier, she donated a kidney to a father of one of her students. On August 5, 2006, her father discovered her body in her home. Stab wounds were clearly visible. Suspicion fell on her husband, Mike Pagel. They were busy getting divorced at the time. Mike wrote in one of his journals how much he hated Renee. In the week before her life ended, Renee told her friends that if something were to happen to her, it was Mike. There was also no sign of forced entry or anything having been stolen. In April 2005, Mike allegedly vandalized the car of one of Renee's friends. He said that he would make all of her friends pay. This unfortunately was not enough to convict Mike with anything, and the case soon grew cold. That was until 2018 when investigators decided to reopen the case. The investigators interviewed Mike again. Mike then made a statement that led the police to a weapon that was used to take Renee's life. That was enough to finally charge him. He was arrested on Thursday, February 6, 2020 by Michigan State Police in Bay City. He was then taken to Kent County. In October 2020, Mike Pagel was sentenced to 25 to 50 years in prison. On April 19, 1991, around 1 in the afternoon, David Hibbs arrived at his house eager to tell his mother, Joy Hibbs, that he had made the honor roll on his report card. Unfortunately, instead of finding his family house in Cord in Pennsylvania the way he had left it, he returned to find it in a smoke-filled state. David ran to the back kitchen door after noticing that his mother's car was in the driveway, but heavy smoke stopped him from going through. David somehow managed to observe that the 4 gas stove burners were all lit up. At his young age, the only logical reason to what must have caused the fire was that his mother had been cooking and had forgotten to put out the fire. A helpless David yelled for assistance in panic. He was heard by neighbors doing yard work, and they tried to go in to find Joy Hibbs, but the fire was too fierce. They immediately called the firefighters. Before the firefighters arrived, as the fire increased and burned endlessly, the neighbors tried to put it out with a garden hose. After what seemed like a lifetime, the fire was finally put out by the firefighters, and a paramedic sadly informed 10-year-old David that his mother had passed away. The body of 36-year-old Joy Hibbs was found by the firefighters in David's bedroom. She had been burnt beyond recognition on the remains of David's mattress. Initially, detectives thought Joy Hibbs had perished in an accidental fire, but an autopsy revealed otherwise. There was no indication that Joy had inhaled smoke. Thus, it was obvious that she had already passed away before the fire was started. Also, Joy Hibbs had been brutally assaulted, strangled with wire cords, and then stabbed 5 times in the chest and neck before her attacker purposefully started the fire to hide every iota of evidence at the scene. This was a clever cover-up approach by the killer, given that the house had been completely destroyed from the fire, and that the neighbors had destroyed important evidence while attempting to put out the fire. According to the findings of the fire marshal's investigation, the fire originated from 4 different locations in the home. 2 in the kitchen, 1 in David's bedroom, and 1 in the corridor. According to the investigators, the morning of her death, Joy had cashed her paycheck. Her purse's contents were tossed on the living room floor, and the police found her wallet stuffed under the couch. The absence of evidence was compounded by the difficulty the investigators experienced in determining a motive. Joy was adored by all, worked part-time as a medical assistant, and was committed to her family. David Hibbs described his mother as graceful, polite, and easygoing. Authorities had no leads whatsoever as to the person who would want to kill her. On the day she was killed, Joy had dropped her 2 kids off at school in the morning. She received her paycheck, ran a few errands, and got home shortly after 11 o'clock in the morning. A church pastor and another member of the congregation dropped by for a visit shortly after she returned home. Joy Hibbs had indicated a desire to celebrate Easter in the church. Just before noon, the pastor and a member of the church departed the Hibbs family house. According to eyewitnesses, there was a dark blue Monte Carlo parked across the Hibbs yard shortly after the church pastor and his member left. The car was said to have remained there until 1 p.m. 2 days after Joy Hibbs' murder, former Bristol County Police Chief Tommy Mills, who was also a narcotics detective, reached out to the residence of Robert Francis Atkins in Falls, Pennsylvania. Robert lived about 2 hours away from where Joy Hibbs lived. Joy and her husband would occasionally buy tiny amounts of marijuana from Robert Atkins, who also appeared to have been their former neighbor. Robert resisted letting the detectives into his house. In the driveway, Detective Tommy Mills spotted a dark-colored Monte Carlo that matched a witness's description of a similar vehicle parked carelessly outside Joy's house shortly before the neighborhood heard the fire. However, during further investigation, the witness said Robert Atkins' automobile wasn't the one they saw. Robert Atkins was invited to undergo a polygraph by the investigators, but he refused, explaining that he had damaged his arm and that his lawyer had instructed him to wait since the nerve damage would affect the polygraph results. He further disclosed that he was camping at the Poconos with his family friends and co-workers when Joy's murder took place. Detectives soon verified his alibi. Robert confirmed that he bought a little marijuana for the Hibbs, but he wasn't a dealer. In the weeks preceding his mother's murder, David Hibbs overheard her arguing with Robert Atkins on the phone over the most recent purchase of a baggie of marijuana. Because the baggie was packed with stems and seeds, Joy demanded her money back from Robert. When asked by the police, Robert confirmed these arguments. He, however, stated that he had informed Joy that he couldn't refund her the money. According to him, it was simply improper. Investigators couldn't understand how a few tiny baggies of marijuana could cause someone to die. The couple was only spending $20 to $40 on marijuana at a time, not enough to get the attention of major sellers. On April 27, 1991, a co-worker of April Atkins, the wife of Robert Atkins, came forward to say that on the day Joy Hibbs was murdered, she had called the Atkins residence between 1 p.m. and 1:30 p.m., and Robert Atkins had picked up the call. On hearing this, the police now thought Joy's murder took place between 11:50 and 12:50. The police turned their attention to Joy's private life after determining that Robert Atkins' alibi appeared to be flawless. They questioned Joy's relatives and friends and found nothing unusual, except for the person who had killed Joy. No one seemed to harbor any wicked intentions for her. Robert Atkins was still a person of interest in the case, despite having an alibi, though. 23 years after Joy was brutally murdered, a new Bristol Township detective, Michael Slaughter, was assigned the cold case in April 2014. Detective Slaughter made the decision to visit April Atkins, who claimed that she had never been questioned by authorities regarding the death of Joy Hibbs. She, however, clung to the narrative that her family was on vacation in the Poconos that weekend and hadn't learned of Joy's murder until they returned. A few days later, Detective Slaughter reinterrogated Robert Atkins regarding his movements at the time of Joy's death. He supported his wife's account of going camping and revealed to Slaughter that he had been a secret narcotics informant in 1991, doing drug deals and then reporting them to the police. During an interview with Slaughter in May 2014, a coworker of Joy claimed that on the Monday before she was killed, a man called Joy at work and threatened to kill her. The coworker decided not to report the call to the police because Joy's husband was now the focus of the investigation at the time. 2 years later, in September 2016, April Atkins, who is now divorced, traveled to the Bristol Township Police Station in order to provide a taped statement regarding her ex-husband's whereabouts during the murder of Joy Hibbs. Detective Slaughter was informed by April that Robert Atkins had returned home covered in blood after allegedly stabbing someone and setting their home on fire. He then instructed her to gather the children, take a few days off work, and travel to the Poconos in the north. Out of anxiety and fear, April remained silent. That day, Robert Atkins took a shower after washing his blood-stained clothing. April Atkins didn't find out about Joy Hibbs' murder until after the family had returned from the Poconos. Even with this revelation, nothing significant occurred in Joy Hibbs for the next 5 years until November 2021, when Bucks County Detective David Hanks located a former coworker of April Atkins back in 1991. The coworker initially denied knowing April, but after the DA subpoenaed her to testify before a grand jury over the phone call she had made to the Atkins house, she changed her story. When he was supposed to be camping at the Poconos, Robert Atkins answered the phone call. The following month, Detective Hanks caught a conversation between Robert Atkins and his ex-wife, April, on tape. Robert was led to believe that April had informed her roommate of his involvement in the murder of Joy Hibbs. Naturally, this raised Robert Atkins' blood pressure. Also, his son testified in court in April 2022 that his father had informed him in December that he was likely going to be arrested soon for something that had occurred many years earlier. Robert first mentioned that a woman had died in a fire to his son before mentioning that she had been stabbed. Finally, 31 years after killing Joy Hibbs, Robert Atkins was arrested in May 2022. He is presently being held at the Bucks County Correctional Facility and faces charges of first and second-degree murder, 7 counts of arson, 2 counts of robbery, and 7 counts of first-degree arson in relation to the death of Joy Hibbs. The case of Nicole Ford. Manipulation is a special psychological technique that allows one to achieve personal goals without considering the partner's interests. Notably, a skilled manipulator keeps people they need close to them for years, using various tactics, methods, and approaches in intimate relationships. Such manipulation usually makes the other party doubt the correctness of their decisions, feel guilty, and can significantly undermine their self-esteem. Typically, relationships with a manipulator start off ideally, as these individuals know how to gain trust, charm, and win hearts. They appear caring, understanding, empathetic, and someone with whom one can share joys and sorrows at any time. Gradually, they probe your weaknesses and begin to exploit them. Sometimes, such individuals even commit serious crimes through others, in such a way that the manipulated person believes they are acting entirely of their own volition, or for the greater good. The case of Nicole is not unique, but it serves as a vivid example of how a man can skillfully manipulate the emotions of women who are in love with him. He kept one lover from leaving for many years, destroying her emotional state with his actions and convincing her that she could not live without him. He persuaded another lover to commit a crime, convincing her it was a righteous act to save a child. He planned everything down to the last detail, but recordings from street surveillance cameras did not allow him to escape accountability. What is known about Nicole, or simply Nicole Ford, was born on July 11, 1989, in the northern part of the U.S., in a small town in Minnesota. There was almost no information about her parents and early life in public sources. According to some reports, her father left the family when she was very young, and her mother raised her alone, striving to provide her daughter with everything necessary and a good education. Nicole was one of the top students in her school, and she was also actively involved in sports from a young age, particularly track and field and martial arts, in which she excelled. In her senior years of school, she decided that she wanted to dedicate her life to fighting crime and would serve in law enforcement. She did everything possible to successfully pass the exams and meet the physical standards required for admission to the police academy, graduating with honors. After finishing school and being admitted to the academy, Nicole moved from the small provincial town to the large metropolis of Minneapolis. In 2010, she was accepted into the Criminal Investigation Department of the Maine Police Headquarters in Minneapolis as an assistant investigator, and after several years of dedicated service, she was appointed as an investigator. Colleagues described her as a determined, goal-oriented woman and a fearless officer ready to take risks. However, in her personal life, without realizing it, Nikki became a pawn in the hands of a sophisticated manipulator. The perfect start to a doomed relationship. In 2012, at a Taekwondo competition, 23-year-old Nicole met a coach and martial arts master, Timothy Tim Ama, who was 8 years her senior and initially didn't spark much interest in her. However, the slender young beauty with luxurious long hair and a charming smile immediately caught his attention. It's worth noting that Timothy was known as a ladies' man with numerous romantic partners, whom he frequently changed and sometimes dated several women at the same time. He was skilled in winning over women he liked and was not accustomed to rejections. Timothy also lived in Minneapolis, quickly found out where Nikki trained and obtained her phone number. He initially offered her personal training services, but almost immediately began courting her, quickly winning over her heart. Nicole saw Tim as a kind, open, and charming man. She developed a sincere affection for him and, before she knew it, she had fallen deeply in love. Soon, they started a romantic relationship and began dating. Initially, the man behaved gallantly, showed care, and made every effort to demonstrate that he was a reliable person one could depend on. Amahara was strong, intelligent, eloquent, and had the ability to dominate the women who fell in love with him. The relationship progressed rapidly, and after a month and a half, they decided to move in together and live under the same roof. The first 6 months went wonderfully, and Nicole felt happy and loved next to this person. She opened up and trusted him, believing there were no secrets between them. However, Timothy's behavior gradually began to change. He revealed his true nature, but he did so subtly enough that his chosen one was not alarmed for quite some time. The sophisticated tormentor, Timothy was an attractive, witty, and charismatic man with a muscular build, enjoying success with opposite gender. He took great pride in himself, and even after entering into a serious relationship, he did not stop flirting with other women, often doing so in Nicole's presence, which deeply hurt her and made her feel humiliated. At first, Nicole hoped that over time, her boyfriend would shake off his bachelor habits, become more restrained, and settle down. But months passed, and nothing changed. Meanwhile, Tim assured her that he loved only her and was passionate and tender as a partner, but outside the home, he did not miss a single opportunity to flirt and regularly engaged in affairs. Soon, Tim became openly annoyed by his girlfriend's jealousy. He began to snap at her, stating that he would behave as he wanted, and she had no right to tell him otherwise. However, he usually apologized afterward, telling Nicole that no one would ever love her as much as he did, and she forgave him, continuing to make future plans. In the fall of 2014, during a minor domestic argument, Timothy unexpectedly flew into a rage, grabbed Nicole by the throat, and squeezed so hard that she couldn't breathe and almost lost consciousness. Suddenly, he came to his senses, let Nicole go, and pushed her so hard that she fell, hitting a wall. At that moment, she realized that this was an unhealthy relationship that needed to be ended immediately. However, her emotional attachment to the man was too strong, and it only took another apology from him for her to forgive him. In addition to bouts of aggression and infidelity, another extremely unpleasant trait of Tim's came to light. He was extremely jealous and obsessed with control. The man monitored every step his chosen one took her phone without permission, checked her contact lists, messages and messengers and social networks, and kept a close eye on who she talked to and where she was. This continued for several years. Tim could cause a scandal out of nowhere, unjustly accusing his beloved of infidelity, while he himself did not miss an opportunity to be unfaithful. He often resorted to physical violence, but continued to convince Nicole that no one would ever love her as he did if she ever attempted to leave. When ending the relationship, the man resorted to blackmail, claiming that he would end his life and it would be on her conscience. In November 2015, after another argument that ended in violence, Nicole packed her bags and, with a suitcase in hand, left the house. Timothy, who until the last moment did not believe she would do it, saw his partner leaving, chased her down outside, grabbed her by the hair, and dragged her back into the house. But the woman began to scream and struggle, attracting the attention of neighbors, and the man was forced to back down, letting her go. After so many years in an abusive and manipulative relationship, Nicole could finally breathe a sigh of relief. However, Tim had no intention of leaving her alone. He merely switched tactics, moving from threats and blackmail back to romantic pursuits. He met her after work, sent flowers to her home, wrote messages filled with tenderness, and pleaded for a chance to start over. For over a month, Nicole was resolute and had no plans to return to her former lover. But in December of that same year, she unexpectedly discovered that she was pregnant. This was certainly not in her plans, but the thought of not keeping the baby never crossed her mind. She knew that if her ex-boyfriend found out about her pregnancy, it would provide him with perfect leverage for manipulation in an attempt to win her back. So she tried to hide her pregnancy, but was unsuccessful. They still shared many mutual friends and acquaintances, so by January 2016, information about her expecting a child reached Timothy. There was no doubt about who the father was, prompting him to urge her to return to him, arguing that their child should be raised in a complete family. Nicole, who had grown up without a father herself, understood how challenging it would be for her and the baby. But she also realized that a life with a manipulative and cruel person would not lead to anything good. She adamantly refused to return to her ex-boyfriend, though she still had feelings for him, but she noted that she would allow him to participate in the life and upbringing of their child as a nominal father. On June 20th, 2016, Nicole gave birth to a healthy boy whom she named Callahan Amore, as her former lover acknowledged paternity and declared his readiness to raise the child with her. However, it soon became clear that giving the baby this man's surname and registering him as the parent was far from the best idea. Despite Tim's assurances that he would be a good father and his pleas to reunite so that Callahan could grow up into the man had hoped that the child would become a reliable tool for manipulating his ex-girlfriend. But Nicole was no longer susceptible and Amore quickly lost interest in the baby. Nicole took nearly a year of maternity leave and devoted herself entirely to caring for her little son. She hadn't even thought about new relationships, immersing herself completely in motherhood. Meanwhile, Timothy continued his carefree life with numerous lovers and casual connections. It got to the point where he had a signal, a purple light in his bedroom, which meant that the homeowner was alone and expecting company. Any of his lovers could respond to this signal, and after which the purple light would go out, signaling to others that Tim's bed was already taken. It was like something out of a red light district, but the man and his numerous partners were quite satisfied with this arrangement. In the same year of 2016, shortly after the birth of Callahan, 36-year-old Amore moved in and began living with his 18-year-old protege named Colin Eisen. He had been training the young woman since she was 14, and she was deeply in love with her mentor, despite the significant age difference. Initially, the couple hid their close relationship, and to outsiders, they claimed that Colin was just renting a room in his house. However, it soon became apparent to everyone that a fiery romance was unfolding between the coach and his ward. Timothy was thrilled with his young lover, and according to friends, the girl resembled a naive child, trying her hardest to impress the man she absolutely adored. By the summer of 2017, Nicole was forced to return to work. She was raising her child alone, as the boy's father was hardly any help, and the young mother simply ran out of money, prompting her to end her maternity leave early. At that time, she was working as a forensic expert at the main police headquarters in Minneapolis, and her work schedule could be unpredictable. During the day, little Callahan was in daycare, but if his mother was held up at work or called in unexpectedly, she would ask Timothy to look after their son. There were a few reasons for this. First, she believed it was beneficial for the boy to spend time with his father, who had recently vowed to be involved in his upbringing. Second, since her former lover was not helping financially, she thought he could at cost of nanny services. Alma did not enjoy spending time with the child. It was a burden to him, and he was unwilling to take on the responsibility. Thus, he shifted it, along with all related troubles, onto his young lover. Colin quickly developed a fondness for the little boy and loved taking care of him. Thus, the man dumped his parental responsibilities on the girl, explaining it by telling her that Nicole was a bad mother who did not want to care for her child, and was looking for any excuse to offload her son onto them. In the spring of 2017, Nicole, for the first time since breaking up with Tim, entered into a romantic relationship. Her new partner was a fellow police officer named Donovan Ford. He treated his beloved with tenderness and care, and also felt paternal towards Callahan, expressing readiness to adopt the boy. Everything seemed wonderful, but that was until Amar found out about his ex's new relationship. Timothy did not love Nicole, and had long stopped trying to establish any relationship with her. But the mere fact that she was now not alone and happy enraged him. It also ignited a furious desire to annoy or completely destroy these relationships. As his main weapon in this endeavor, he decided to use their son as well as the naive Colin, who believed every word he said. The child's father regularly reported to social services that Donovan was beating, tormenting, and treating his son cruelly, and that the boy's mother was doing nothing to stop it. As a result, Child Protective Services frequently visited the family. They never managed to confirm any instance of domestic violence, but each time Nicole and her new lover were interrogated like criminals. They knew who was trying to ruin their lives, but were powerless to stop it. And this continued for years. Simultaneously, Timothy kept convincing Colin that Callahan was in danger, that Nikki and Donovan were cruel to him, and that one day they might simply end his life in what they would claim was an accident. The girl believed her lover, felt terribly sorry for the boy who had literally grown up before her eyes, and was ready to protect him. Timothy literally harassed his ex and her new partner, threatened them, tried to provoke them, and even filed police reports claiming that these law enforcement officers were abusing their official powers, hoping they would be fired. Donovan tried to have a man-to-man talk with Timothy, but it yielded no results. The ex-boyfriend continued to terrorize his former girlfriend and her new boyfriend, turning their lives into a real nightmare. In the battle for the little son, Tim decided not to stop at just threats and harassment, and soon took the matter to court, claiming his rights to the child and his desire for sole custody. Nicole did not anticipate this and was genuinely frightened, knowing her ex's ability to lie and manipulate. She understood that he didn't actually want his son. He just wanted to get back at her for her happiness with Donovan. At the same time, Nicole finally decided to seek a restraining order against Timothy, citing his erratic behavior and the threat he posed. She was confident that the custody issue would likely resolve in her favor, but she also realized that the legal battles could drag on for years, as Tim was not one to back down easily. Meanwhile, Timothy continued to poison his ex-girlfriend's life, concocting various fabrications. He even tried to accuse her of attempting to take his life, claiming she had tried to run him over with her car. He claimed that he managed to jump away just in time, and that Nicole only ran over his foot. Astonishingly, he took this case to court, but he couldn't prove anything since there were no witnesses, no camera footage, and importantly, no actual injury. In September 2022, the custody case went to court. The man once again tried to slander his former lover, accusing her of and even secured support from Colin, who corroborated his story. He also tried to persuade little Callahan to say that his mom and Donovan were hitting him, but the child not only refused to lie, but also revealed that his father was coaxing him to lie by promising him sweets. The court took the child's account into consideration and awarded sole custody to the Nicole was about to breathe a sigh of relief, but Timothy persisted and appealed the decision. Initially, He secured the right to see the child once a week under the mother's supervision, and later he was allowed to spend time alone with the boy without Nicole's presence, which greatly upset and frightened her, as anything could be expected from him. Ultimately, after several more court appeals and to avoid further disputes, Timothy was allowed to see his son at a specialized family center designed to prevent parents in conflict from encountering each other and causing further psychological damage to the children. The facility had multiple separate parking lots and separate entrances, so one parent could bring the child for the other parent to meet, but the ex-spouses did not interact or even see each other. The mysterious attacker. On April 19, 2022, when Nicole arrived at the family center to pick up her son after another visit with his father, something unforeseen happened. She parked her car and was heading towards the entrance, but she didn't make it inside. Suddenly, a person dressed in black clothing, a mask, and a hood approached her, pulled out a gun, and shot her 4 times at close range, then quickly disappeared in an unknown direction in a black pickup. Incredibly, Nicole not only remained conscious, but also managed to dial emergency services. However, she couldn't convey anything to the dispatcher. One of the bullets hit her neck, missing the carotid artery by a millimeter and damaging her vocal cords, so she could only make gurgling sounds. At that moment, a woman who happened to witness the event came to her aid. She was just passing by when she heard the shots and saw the fleeing black figure jump into a vehicle and disappear. The woman quickly pulled over, made sure the shooter had left, and then rushed to help the victim. She was the one who explained to the dispatcher what had happened, provided the address, and pressed her clothing against Nicole's wounds to stop the saving her life. The victim spent several days teetering on the brink of life and death in a coma. She lost a lot of blood and her vital organs were affected, but despite the severity of her injuries, doctors managed to stabilize her condition. Medical professionals believed Nicole was incredibly lucky, as death was only millimeters away from 2 bullets. One passed near an artery and the other nearly struck her heart. The woman survived, and now it was necessary to figure out who wanted her dead. Prime suspect, Nicole had no doubt that her ex-lover was the one who had shot her, which she reported to the police as soon as she regained consciousness. Earlier, while the woman was in a coma, Donovan had also informed the police that apart from Timothy, the victim had no other enemies. Timothy was indeed interrogated and checked first, but he had a solid alibi, as he was at the family center with his son at the time of the attack, confirmed by staff and internal surveillance footage. Simultaneously, the theory was investigated that someone among the criminals she had previously arrested and helped incarcerate individuals who might have organized the attack on the police officer and investigator. Undoubtedly, due to her profession, she could have had ill wishes, but Nicole herself was convinced that Timothy was involved in the assassination attempt. At the scene, 4 casings were found, and a camera at the nearest intersection captured a suspicious black Dodge Ram pickup running a red light without license plates. This same vehicle was mentioned by the eyewitness, who had essentially saved the victim's life. Thus, it was necessary to check what vehicles Timothy owned. During another interrogation, the suspect mentioned that he had a Chevrolet Traverse SUV in his garage, and he also owned a Dodge Challenger. However, according to Timothy, he never had a pickup. Yet, the investigation showed that the man was lying, and a black Dodge Ram, identical to the one used by the shooter, was registered in his name. Once the truth emerged, Timothy was arrested pending further investigation. When shown the surveillance footage, he recalled that he did indeed have such a vehicle, but claimed he rarely used it and it mostly sat idle. Moreover, he noted that his pickup had colorful stickers on the doors and hood. This was verified, and indeed his vehicle had stickers, but they looked as though they had been applied just recently. Nonetheless, all the evidence was circumstantial, and law enforcement needed to find the weapon and the actual shooter to fully resolve the case. It turned out that Timothy's vehicle was equipped with a satellite navigation system, which allowed the tracing of the vehicle's entire route on that day. It was discovered that the car was brought to the back entrance of a school on the evening of April 18th. There it remained all night and almost the entire next day. Road cameras traced that the vehicle arrived there with license plates, but by the next evening it left without them. The person who used the vehicle that day was of short stature, slight build, and from a distance the silhouette appeared feminine. As a result, it was decided to immediately detain and interrogate Timothy's live-in girlfriend, Colin Larson. A search was also conducted at the couple's home, and although the weapon used in the crime was not found, law enforcement discovered ammunition of the same caliber used by the shooter. The frightened girl almost immediately began to give confessional testimony, confirming that Timothy was the mastermind behind the crime. However, Colin believed that her lover had acted with good intentions, thinking they were trying to radically save little Callahan from a cruel mother. Timothy had spent years manipulating his trusting young girlfriend, convincing her that the boy was being mistreated and subjected to violence, and she unquestioningly believed every word her lover said. She felt immensely sorry for the child and believed that Timothy wished his son well and wanted to protect him. The trial of the conspirators began in November of the same year. Colin confessed that her lover had provided her with the firearm and had taken the pistol back after the assassination attempt and disposed of it, but she did not know what exactly he did with it. The prosecution was largely built on circumstantial evidence, a point that the defendant's lawyers emphasized. Nevertheless, the decisive factor was Colin's confession, who still could not believe that her lover had deceived her and believed that they were committing a righteous act. The court also considered the testimony of the victim herself about what kind of person Timothy was and how skillfully he had always managed to manipulate the women who loved him. 42-year-old Timothy was found guilty of organizing a first-degree attempted murder as well as incitement and aiding and abetting. He was sentenced to 18 years in prison, the maximum term for such cases. 24-year-old Colin Larson, as the executor, received 16 years in prison. A year after the assassination attempt, Nicole managed to fully recover physically and emotionally. She and Donovan officially legalized their relationship, and the man became the best father Callahan could ever wish for. The now married couple is expecting their first child together, and the woman who saved Nicole's life then will be the child's godmother. Finally, it should be added that Timothy, with good behavior, will be eligible for parole in 2035. However, he will be prohibited from coming within 100 meters of his son, former lover, and her family members and from attempting any form of contact with them. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.